personal views and opinions expressed by our podcast guests are their own and are not legal advice or official statements by their organizations. Hello, my name is Debbie Reynolds. They call me the Data Diva. This is the Data Diva Talks Privacy podcast, where we discuss data privacy issues with industry leaders around the world with information that businesses need to know now. I have a very special guest on the show, all the way from the United Kingdom, Giulia Carna. She is the Senior Data Protection Counsel at ACI Worldwide. Welcome.
Hi, Debbie. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. I actually saw you speak at PrivSec in London a couple of years ago. I was actually hiding in the back of the auditorium because I had a cold that day. But I sent you a note and said, hey, I really loved your presentation. You were on a panel about privacy enhancing tech. And then we've kept in touch since then. And it took us a while, but we finally got our schedules aligned so that you could be on the podcast. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you. Actually, this is my first podcast, and I can say that I am really truly thankful and humble to be here in your presence. So thank you.
Well, it's my pleasure to have you on the show. I think in our communications together, I think you made a comment on a post you and I both saw, and I felt that you very much champion human rights, rights of people, and really standing up for what you think is right. And I think that's such an admirable quality that you have, in addition to being really brilliant in terms of understanding law, regulation, compliance, and where things are going on privacy.
Oh, thank you. I think that this is one of the main reasons why I am really passionate of privacy and human rights. And this is why I made my passion as my job. Because I think that who loves privacy and who works in this space must really have a great conception of human rights and trust.
I agree with that. To me, it makes me feel good that I can do something that can really make a difference in people's lives. I agree with you on that. But why don't you give me your background? Tell me your journey into privacy and how you came to your career in data protection.
Oh, sure, Debbie. So I am an Italian lawyer, and I started my career in corporate and commercial law, basically. Think that I started working in law firm in Milan in corporate law, commercial, and tax law. And then after 7 years, I moved as a in-house lawyer where I start working in commercial law, but also in compliance, regulatory matters, and also privacy law. But my real career in this world started basically 7 years back when I started doing projects on data subject rights and how to prepare a company with the GDPR. And since 2017, basically, that I was dealing only with data protection and data privacy matters. And since then, basically, I never went back to my commercial and corporate background. Now I am working for ACI Worldwide. We are a global provider of real-time payments and banking solution. And basically, we are helping thousands of banking and business worldwide companies to facilitate transactions and payment systems. And then I work as a senior data protection counsel for this company. Here, I had really the chance to collaborate closely with different departments, such as product team, marketing team, security team, and I had the possibility to providing legal support on a wide range of matters like compliance methods and risk management matters. So I can say that my time spent in ACI gave me valuable insight into the privacy and practical consequences of legal decision on business matters. So this is my journey and how I started in the privacy field, basically.
That's fascinating. I love the fact that you say you worked with all these different teams and collaborating with them. And I think especially, and we're going to talk about AI, especially as the technology is getting more complex and you work with a technology company, you have a front row seat to a lot of the complexities that happen within organizations, especially as they try to evolve with innovation and then also complying with certain regulations. Tell me a little bit about AI and what's happening with artificial intelligence. Since you're in Europe now, obviously the EU has their AI Act that was recently finalized. And also we know that there's some activity happening in the UK about artificial intelligence as well. But give me your thoughts about what is happening as someone in Europe. I know from the US, we're watching with great interest in what's happening in Europe around artificial intelligence. What are your thoughts?
Yes, Debbie, I think that this is a really strong moment for Europe because the EU the AI Act will have the same impact that the GDPR had 5 years back. I can say that the most important difference between the EU and the US, for example, is the risk-based approach. Because this piece of legislation is basically based on risks. And there are several categorization, four different, risk categories. We have the prohibited AI systems that must be removed within 6 months of the AI Act coming into force. Luckily, towards the end of this month or April, June this year, this system has a significant risk to fundamental rights, safety, or health, such as, for example, social credit scoring systems or emotion recognition system that use biometric data in the workplace, except for medical or safety reasons. Or for example, AI system used for making risk assessments of natural persons based on the profiling of a person. This will be the prohibited AI system. Then we have the high risk AI system that are those that are covered by certain EU harmonization legislation and are used as a safety component of a product or the AI system is itself a product covered by the EU harmonization legislation listed in Annex 1. All systems that must go a third-party conformity assessment under the EU harmonization legislation listed in Annex 1. Then this category of AI systems referred to in Annex 3 are also considered to be high-risk systems. And a provider, for example, who consider that those systems are not high risk, must document in their assessment before placing that system in the market or putting this system into service. Then we have a limited risk AI system. Those systems are not high risk systems, but they do pose such transparency risk. So this means that they are subject to specific transparency requirements. For example, providers must make sure that users know that they interacting with a machine. And then we have minimum risk system that can be freely used without additional requirements. For example, they are systems that we use for language translation tools, for example, video games or weather forecasting tools. On top of these four risk category system, we have specific requirements on providers of generative AI models. These models are basically used to create general purposes AI system like the famous ChatGPT. In this case, providers are required to perform fundamental right impact assessments and conformity assessment to mitigate risk and test and monitor the systems for cybersecurity and for accuracy. This is quite difficult and complex framework, but I think that right now, what it is relevant for companies and especially for multinational companies is that you can consider how being compliant with this new legislation, because the first step for a company should be to know which all the relevant laws and any additional sector specific legislation, and then map out the potential gaps and also gaps and overlap with other legislation, such as, for example, AI acts with the GDPR, with the DORA regulations, with the Cyber Resilience Act. And at this point of time, it is really crucial to conduct a risk assessment, including, for example, the PIA and any other necessary assessments, updating policies, for example, and also leverage the process that we have already in place, for example, for privacy and procurement compliance, because some of these compliance tasks, for example, the DPIA, will be exactly the same process that we can still use for being compliant with the AI Act. And this is I think, the main keywords of this new piece of legislation. The UK, like also the GDPR, they have completely different perspective, because the UK is less comprehensive, I think, and less centralized, because they prefer to have a sector-specific perspective. And maybe the same thing also for the US, because I think that the US has a sector-specific perspective, as the US had with the privacy, without a unified set of AI principles and guidelines. The EU said and hope that the AI Act will have the same roots and the same baseline as the GDPR, and they will serve as a basic starting point for the global market.
I agree. My perspective about the GDPR, I always thought that the GDPR will be very influential even in jurisdictions where people didn't really have to follow GDPR, like the US, and it has been. So I think some of that influence has been, we've seen laws since the GDPR was enacted that around the world, certain jurisdictions have borrowed bits and pieces of GDPR, like maybe the calling data controllers or data subjects or different types of things. So I think that the AI Act will be very influential in that way. But also, and I want your thoughts, I think one thing that the US is getting used to or will have to get used to more now that I think is very typical and common in Europe that you all are already accustomed to, and that is doing these risk-based approach assessments of privacy uses and also AI uses. So what do you think?
On this point, I think that the US will have exactly the same standard that the US had for the GDPR, for the privacy world. I still think that the US will have a very sectorial specific rules on this. But what I believe is that there is at least willingness to find a sort of common ground on these important topics. And also because the US, the UK, and the EU have really different approach, but on something they are trying to converge and talk the same language. Because I think that the EU AI Act is more centered on the human centric, while maybe the US is more focused on the product side. Maybe it's a different perspective, but on something we all want to find a common language and a common view on things. Because all the globe thinks that we need and we must deal with the AI because this is the future of the world, especially in the digital world.
I agree. We'll definitely see how things play out. I think that there is a lot of pressure from around the world to see what the US wants to do about maybe harmonizing privacy legislation and maybe hopefully some federal privacy law. We'll see. I'm not going to hold my breath, but it can definitely happen for sure. So, what is happening in the world right now that concerns you as it relates to privacy?
It's say that this is a really challenging field and constantly changes because the technology is constantly changing. So I think that the main challenge will be focused on the new technology, so AI, big data, blockchain, Internet of Things. And the main challenge for privacy professional people will become and to gain more technical knowledge and to talk the same language, maybe technology team, product team. And this is one of the skills that will be required for privacy professional people to have, especially if you are working for a global company, basically. So yeah, so I think that right now, this will be one of the main challenging. So all focused on technology, tools, innovation, rather than compliance task. Because I think that since when the GDPR came into force, since 2018 until last year, the main challenge were more focused on cross-border data and all the compliance tasks, DPIA, data privacy framework. But now we are moved on the technological side because company now know what they have to do, and the majority of company, at least this is my hope, already have data privacy framework in place with all these compliance tasks to be done. And now, yes, this is the next step. So just based on technology and to keep an eye and to have a better and technical understanding of these tools because they can have a really strong consideration on privacy side. Personally, I am a lawyer who, of course, is really conscious of personal data because we know that personal data is not only an asset and a reason for data monetization for a company, but at the same time, I really believe in technology, in innovation, and I think that all these tools, AI, big data, can be really helpful for us as a privacy professional, and also for the company to pursue their business goals. But at the same time, we really need to have consideration about the privacy implication for using these tools. So we really need to find a kind of balance between business goals, also how to preserve human rights and how to build the trust with your customers and consumers also.
I agree with that. I think that there has to be a new level of transparency that maybe companies never had to do before as a result of this. And then all of that to me goes towards whether consumers trust you or humans trust you or not with their data. And so I think that, and I agree wholeheartedly that companies are shifting from just thinking about privacy and technology from a purely compliance lens to understanding how they need to change the way that they operate internally and then how the technology plays into that. And then I also think because of the rapid changes and development in the technology, it's just going to make that challenge more complex for organizations. What do you think?
Yes, I totally get your point. Yeah. I think that this is a crucial point that companies are trying to do right now. And this is also our responsibility as privacy professional people to have really a deep understanding of all this technicality.
So, if it were the world according to you, Giulia, and we did everything that you said, what would be your wish for privacy or data protection anywhere in the world, whether that be the technology, regulation, or human behavior?
For me, would be a balance of all this, of technology, of fundamental rights, human behavior. I think that it is not possible to separate all of these factors. But my wish basically will be to being flexible and believe in technology and innovation, but keeping secure and consider the personal data as a fundamental right and not just a reason for data monetization, because the personal data is much more than this.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I agree with that. It does have to be a balance, and we need to look at it from different dimensions. So, but thank you so much for staying up late and having this call with me. I'm really happy that we were able to connect and have this episode. So, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Debbie. Thank you. For me, this was a wonderful experience to be on this podcast with you. I always followed your podcast and I really like your perspective of data privacy as a fundamental right. And I think that we are really glad to have you as a leader in this space because, as I always said, data privacy is not just a law, it's not just a regulation, but is mainly a fundamental human rights. And each privacy professional people must feel these responsibilities on their own shoulder, as I do, and you do. So thank you so much, Debbie. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. That's very sweet. Thank you. But yeah, I hope we can have time to collaborate in the future. That would be great. But yeah, well, thank you so much for this session. It's amazing. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye. Have a good night.
You too. Bye-bye.